dark future of the 31st millennium, there is only war. As the countless battles of the far future rage on, greenskin warbands rampage through Imperial sectors, desecrating countless worlds. On one of these unfortunate planets, a dangerous band of Ork Kommandos will soon come face to face with the Imperium's most powerful weapons. At the behest of Lord Gilliman, the Adeptus Custodes now roam the galaxy, hunting down and exterminating the enemies of the Imperium. In today's battle report, we'll see if all the Emperor's own bodyguard can go head-to-head against a team of vicious Orc Kommandos.
Hey guys, welcome to the Battle Report. My name's Blaine, and today my Adeptus Custodes will be battling it out against Nate's Orc Kommandos. In the Battle Report, I chose to bring 4 Custodian Guard operatives. 2 are equipped with Sentinel Blades and Storm Shields, as well as Oath Parchments, while the other 2 are equipped with Guardian Spears. My leader also is equipped with an Oath Parchment.
Hello everyone, my name's Nate, and today I'll be playing the Orcs for today's Battle Report. I took every Orc specialist available to the Kommandos kill team, and equipped my Burna Boy and Comms Boy with Choppas, my Daka Boy with a Stick Bomb, my Rocket Boy with a Choppa and Climbing Rope, and lastly, my Sniper Boy with a Climbing Rope.
In this battle report, Nate and I play Awaken the Data Spirits, a mission from the core rulebook which has us disengaging side objectives using a mission action to increase how much each primary objective is worth for controlling at the end of each turning point.
To begin, I started positioning all of my orcs behind the cover that was available in my deployment zone. Unsure where Blaine would deploy his Custodes, I tried to set up my orcs so that they would all have some level of cover. During this phase, I also spent 2 of my command points to forward deploy 2 operatives further up in the kill zone. The first of which was my Sniper Boy, who I placed on the punishing vantage point. The second was a Slasher Boy, who were forward deployed closer to Blaine's side behind a plasma conduit.
My first deployment is one of my Guardian Spear Custodians, placed with an engaged order in anticipation of being able to shoot the enemy squig operative and dealing massive damage to the enemy team with that boom ability. I follow this up by deploying the other 3 Custodians, including my leader, behind the only piece of heavy terrain close to my deployment zone in hopes of mitigating any potential shots the Sniper Boy might have from that vantage point.
Now into the scouting phase, I ended up taking the free dash, while Blaine took the extra barricade. Using my free dash, I moved my Burna Boy up to my barricade, closer towards the middle of the map.
I used the extra barricade given to me for my scouting option to be able to give myself some more cover moving towards those center objectives on the map, especially with that Sniper Boy looking down on me from the vantage point. Nate passes on using any strategic plays this turning point, which allows me to use Aegis of the Emperor for 1 CP.
At the beginning of the first target reveal step, I revealed rout. Subsequently, my opponent Blaine also revealed rout. I then kicked off the game by making a shooting attack with my Daka Boy towards one of Blaine's Spear Custodes. The Daka Boy makes 5 attacks and hits on force. After rolling, I get 2 hits and 3 misses. Blaine takes 1 defense dice for cover, and is able to save the second defense dice easily. I then used the Donka Dash ability to move my operative into cover.
In retaliation, I move and dash the Custodian with the Guardian Spear and make a shooting attack against the Squig as per my original plan. The Custodian gets 4 attacks hitting on 2s. I get 3 hits and decide to use the Oath Parchment to reroll the miss. It rerolls into a 4th hit. Nate rolls defense dice for the Squig and gets 3 fails.
After the tragic death of my bomb squig, I was forced to roll on the squig's boom ability to see if he explodes. The boom ability states that on a 3-up, the squig explodes and all nearby operatives get hit with the squig's attack. Rolling the d6, I unfortunately rolled a 5, meaning that he goes nuclear and both the comms boy and Grot get hit. Starting with the comms boy, the squig makes his unfortunate dynamite attack by rolling 4s on 3s. Luckily, the squig only gets 1 hit off on the comms boy, which I can easily save. Totally. Except he can't, because somehow I fail to save a single hit on the defense roll. But it's all okay for Mr. Comms Boy, as I decide to use just a scratch for 1 CP to ignore the damage. Next is on to the Commando Grot. Rolling the same attack, I get 2 hits this time. But just like last time, I'm still unable to save a single defense dice. Unfortunately, the Grot's blown to smithereens and is removed from the kill zone.
Unfortunately, we did misread the route Tac-Op while filming this battle report, and I scored it both times incorrectly.
After thinking about it for a moment, I decide to move the Burner Boy up to the middle of the board.
I start my activation by measuring the threat range for the Slasher Boy's charge and the line of sight for the Sniper Boy on the vantage point. I then proceed to move and dash one of the Custodians with the blade and shield onto the objective marker closest to it, where it then performs the disconnect firewall action.
Next, I used my Comms Boy to give an AP to my Breacher Boy, and then I moved him up and over the pipe and behind the barricade.
I then proceed to move and dash the other shield Custodian up to the barricade in front of him, passing on his 3rd APL.
Using my Breacher Boy, I move and dash up to the point and then disconnect firewall with the 3rd AP that I just got from my Comms Boy.
My last activation ends up being my leader, who I scoot out just a little bit to be able to get some potential overwatch in the rest of the turning point.
It's time for my leader to go, and just like the Breacher Boy before him, he will move and dash up to the point, give himself a 3rd APL, and then disconnect the firewall. For my next activation, I move and dash my Rocket Boy back behind some cover, setting him up for the next turning point. At the beginning of my Slasher Boy's turn, I dash him up just close enough to the Custodian to try and make an attack with his throwing knives. The Slasher Boy's throwing knives have 4 attacks and a hit on 3s. I confirm 2 hits, and Blaine easily saves both of them. After a quick discussion about visibility with my opponent Blaine, I repositioned my Sniper Boy slightly in an attempt to hide him from any Custodes that may want to shoot him. After that, that's the last activation for Turning Point 1, on to Turning Point 2. At the end of the first turning point, both my opponent and I score 2 victory points. At the beginning of the second turning point, I gain 1 CP, and my opponent Blaine goes up to 3.
I reveal the execution Tac-Op at the end of this turning point. Going into the second turning point here, Nate wins initiative and proceeds to use 1 CP for Daka Daka Daka. I then proceed to use 1 CP for Aegis to the Emperor, again reducing all crits to normal damage.
Okay, to kickstart this turning point, I decide to activate my Rocky Boy first. I use him to make a shooting attack against one of Blaine's Custodes. I have 5 dice which hit on 4s with Relentless and the Daka 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 rule, which get me 4 hits with AP1. Blaine makes 2 saves and takes 8 damage. And then I decide I move my Rocket Boy, but then I decide not to and take it all back.
For my first activation into the second turning point, I use the same Custodian who killed the Bomb Squig to continue his violent streak to make a shooting attack against the Rocket Boy. I score 3 hits and a crit, which does trigger P1. Nate takes a single cover save and fails the other roll, allowing 11 damage to go through and kill the Rocket Boy. Here is where I scored rout incorrectly the second time. I proceed to charge the Custodian up the ladder onto the furnace into engagement range of the enemy Sniper Boy and declare a fight action. I roll 2 hits and a 5, which becomes a crit due to the lethal 5-up rule. Nate rolls a single hit, which I parry and strike with my remaining hits for 12 total damage, killing his operative.
So, after the brutal death of both my Rocket and Sniper Boy, I decide it's time for a little retribution. Activating my Daka Boy, I move up to the vantage point and decide to shoot the hell out of that Custodian. With 5s on 4s, and getting Relentless because I'm within 6 inches, I was able to score a whopping 4 crits and a hit. Blaine is able to save a crit and a hit, but because of Aegis of the Emperor, he only takes 9 damage, which takes him down to 1 health.
For my second activation, I again perform the charge action, but this time into Nate's Burner Boy with a Shield Custodian. I roll 2 crits and 3 normal hits. Nate rolls an impressive 1 normal hit and 2 crits to match mine. Unfortunately, I take advantage of the Storm Shield's ability and parry both of the opposing crits with only 1 of mine. Nate, with no other option, decides to strike for 4 damage and leaves a whopping 18 damage coming back at his poor Burna, which does incapacitate it.
Next, I activate my Comms Boy and use his special ability to give the Daka Boy an additional APL. Then I charge him into the Custodian that's right next to him.
I proceed to charge my remaining ready Shield Custodian into Nate's Breacher Boy, which seems to be the theme of this turning point. I roll my attack dice and score 3 normal hits and a 5, which becomes a crit. Nate only gets 1 hit to defend himself with, which I parry with my crit due to the brutal rule on the Breach's Ram. The Orc takes 12 damage and is then removed from the kill zone, and I decide to pass with the Custodian's 3rd APL.
Activating my leader, I decide it's time to go get some revenge on that damn Custodian up top. Moving and dashing him, I move on top of the vantage point and decide to shoot at him. I end up rolling 2 hits and 2 crits, which instantly kills the Custode.
To finish off my activations, I decide to get some leader-on-leader action, moving and dashing to make the shot. I roll and retain 3 hits and a crit after using the oath parchment my leader was equipped with, also triggering P1. After some debate, the boss knob retains 1 normal save for cover and rolls an additional save, being a crit. Only 6 damage goes through, and the boss knob is left with 7 wounds remaining.
To finish the turning point, I decide to move and dash my Slasher Boy up to a better spot.
At the end of the firefight phase, I decide to spend 1 CP on the Brotherhood of the Demigods tactical ploy, to try and pull out an additional kill with a free fight action using the Custodian and engagement range of the Comms Boy. I retain 3 crits and 2 normal hits after re-rolling a die with an Oath Parchment and lethal 5-up triggers. Nate scores 2 normal hits, which is unfortunate for him as I parry them both using the Storm Shield, striking my remaining hits for a total of 22 damage. Ouch. At the end of the turning point, I gained 3 VPs from primary objectives and 1 VP from execution, while Nate did not score any. At the top of this turning point, we each generate a command point, putting Nate at 1 and myself at 2. We each roll off for initiative, and I am lucky enough to get it once again. I decide to spend a single command point on Peerless Warriors in anticipation of finishing Nate's dirty orcs off this turn. Nate is reluctant and decides his command point is better saved. We then move into the firefight phase, where I start us off by making a shooting attack on the boss knob once more. This attack, like all from Custodians, is hitting on 2s, and I end up retaining 3 normal hits. Nate takes 1 for his cover, and is able to save an additional hit, only inflicting 3 damage to the leader. I decide to go in for a second shooting attack per my strategic ploy this turn, as I can't let his leader live for much longer. Hitting on 2s, I again retain 3 normal hits. Nate takes a cover save and again saves 1 additional hit. This unfortunately brings his boss knob down to 1 wound, failing to kill it. I finish off my activation by performing a normal move up to the following pipe with a plan.
Using my Totaka Boy, I decide to shoot down on the Custode that's sitting on the point currently. I have 5 dice and retain 1 automatically for being on a punishing vantage point terrain piece, and roll 2 crits and a hit. Blaine is able to save the 2 hits and only takes 4 damage. After that, I decide to just pass with my Orc's final APL.
I retaliate by moving one of my shield custodians to be both within 2 inches of the objective and 2 inches of the Slasher Boy. This allows me to perform the shoot action, choosing the Slasher as my target. I roll my attack dice and retain 4 normal hits. Nate is able to save 1, but still takes a critical 9 damage, leaving the operative at a single wound remaining. I can't let this stand, so I decide to shoot again, this time retaining 2 crits and a normal hit, triggering P1. Nate rolls his 2 defense dice, and doesn't save either of them. This incapacitates the Slasher Boy, and Nate promptly removes him from the kill zone.
Activating my leader, I use his special ability to give himself an APL, then I move and dash him down the ladder and decide to shoot at the custodian that's on the point. While I'm shooting on injury, I have a chance, and I get only a single crit, which miraculously actually goes through, dealing 4 damage to the custodian.
I scooch the other shield custodian backwards and shoot up at the Daka boy on the furnace. I roll and retain 3 hits. Nate rolls his defense dice and saves 2 of the hits, one of which with cover, then decides to spend his only command point on the but-a-scratch tactical ploy to ignore the last remaining hit. The custodian performs his second shooting attack, rolling a crit and 2 hits, which again triggers P1. Nate is able to take a cover save once more and doesn't save any other hits, taking 7 damage. At the end of the firefight phase, I proceed to spend my last command point on Brotherhood of the Demigods once again, continuing the leader feud by taking an Overwatch action. I am able to roll 1 crit and 2 regular hits, giving the shot AP1. Nate takes 1 automatic save for cover and fails the other roll, finally incapacitating his leader and allowing me to reveal the deadly marksman Tac-Op. That wraps up the 3rd turning point. I am awarded 3 primary victory points, while Nate doesn't score any again. To start off the final turning point, Nate and I both gain a CP and roll off the last initiative. Nate gets a 1 unfortunately, and I win the roll. In the strategy phase, I decide to use Peerless Warriors with my only command point, and Nate keeps his handy once more. My first activation is to move my leader into the line of sight of the enemy Daka boy and take a shot. I am able to score 2 crits and 2 regular hits, giving the weapon AP1. Nate decides it's for the best to automatically retain 2 normal saves due to being in cover on a punishing vantage point. This kills the Daka boy and scores the first point for Deadly Marksman. To wrap up the last meaningful activation of the game, I perform a move action with one of my shield custodians and perform the disconnect firewall action on the objective, then proceed to dash him back to the main objective.
After a thrilling battle, the end score works out to 20 victory points earned for the Talons of the Emperor, 2 for the entire team being battle ready, 12 earned from their primary objectives, and 6 earned from their secondaries. And on the other hand, the Ork Kommandos only scored a whopping 4 victory points, 2 earned for the entire team being battle ready, and 2 earned from their primary objectives.
Hi there, my name's Nate,
I'm Blaine.
and we just got done filming the battle report, and we wanted to do a quick overview on our thoughts on the battle. There's a few things we thought we could bring up and kind of talk our mindset throughout the game. How we're feeling, what we're thinking at the moment, and kind of how we could play the game. We also are joined by the other 2 members of our channel, Ethan and Brett. What are your thoughts on the game?
So I think it went well at the start. I want to say that I was actually kind of afraid of your forward deploying a little bit more than I want to admit. But it kind of turned around a lot in like that second turning point.
Yeah, I lost a lot, and that kind of comes to my really first point was my forward deployment choices. This was kind of my first time experimenting with forward deploying that many models. Usually I only ever do 1, this time I want to try out 2. And, well, I thought the decision of the models I took was pretty good. 1 shooting, 1 melee, worked out pretty well. Plus, he also had the ability to throw knives from silent, which I tried but didn't really work against the 1 custodian. The biggest issue was I really drained myself of any potential like CP I could have had throughout the game. I really didn't have a lot to play with, and the entire game I was really fighting trying to figure out where to use my CP. With orcs, I tend to spend it a lot.
Yeah, and that actually brings me up to my first point. the way I played Custodes this time was a little bit different than how I normally play them, and it's I reserved a lot of my CP at the beginning and didn't use double ploys like Aegis the Emperor and Peerless Warriors right away. I kind of waited and looked at how things played out before.
You got yourself a stockpile.
Yeah, exactly, and being able to pull from the Oath Parchment, the free rerolls and stuff like that really helps the Custodes kind of manage the CP a little bit better than most teams. So
that worked out really nicely too. Use your Oath Parchments really well.
Another one thing I wanted to mention about your team though, deploying the Squig like you did, just did not.
That was rough.
Did not, was not in your favor. Maybe deploying him behind heavy terrain or something like that, where he was out of the line of sight, maybe of initial deploying, may have helped a little bit.
It probably would have helped a lot. The biggest issue was I thought the Squig was small enough that behind the pipe you wouldn't be able to see him, but the height of the Custodes, well, double if not triple the Squig.
It kind of counteracts that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I thought I had him in a good enough spot where, and with the heavy in the middle, I wasn't really expecting you to push out this far right away. I expected you to kind of play more middle lane if you could consider it that.
So, and that's why I loved being the attacker and having you deploy first, is that so I could see where those lines of sight were. My initial plan with the scouting option was actually to take the free dash and dash that first custodian out to get the extra movement. Unfortunately, I was trying a little bit too hard to get initiative and sacrifice that by trying to counter what I thought you would do.
Exactly.
And so it was either you were going to change order or get the free dash, and I had to pick one to counter.
And I had two guys right away and conceal as well, so it makes sense.
Yeah, so I picked wrong, but I still got the plan off like I wanted it to.
And it worked off well. The Squig blew up, did no damage to the Orc. I forget which one was next. The comms guy, but it completely annihilated the Grot, and that really hurt. The Grot's not really a great model, but it is a body and an activation.
Yeah, and it gets on points pretty quick.
Exactly.
So.
And the biggest thing throughout this entire game, I was losing operatives before they could activate.
Yeah, it was a big disadvantage, and that's kind of why I took execution. As a Tac-Op,
it worked out really well.
It worked out really well. You kind of have to as a Marine or as an elite team.
Exactly,
any Marine team.
And with the shooting of the Orcs compared to the armor of the Custodes, it just didn't work very well.
Yeah, in the past, the Rocket Boy has done some work. This game though just did not do the work it needed to.
No, he did not get off the salvo I was hoping he would, because he was my deadly marksman, and I was actually really torn whether or not to put him up here instead of my sniper. The biggest thing is I was worried that he would get targeted a little too quickly, because Gwen and I have had games where I have one-shot Custodes pretty reliably with Rocket Boy. So it kind of is what it is.
Roll of the dice,
Exactly.
Really,
and Orc shooting is not an easy thing to come by. Even with Daka, I think I only scored like maybe a handful of crits that entire game.
Yeah, so that first turning point, being able to shut down the Squig right away, my biggest concern was then the sniper on top shooting down.
He did not do much,
and I'm really surprised you actually didn't position him in a way to shoot right away or something like that, or even use him at the beginning of the turning point. We waited for the end, and that really surprised me.
Yeah, some things that obviously I could have played a lot better during this game. The biggest thing I can think of was, and it's a little bit frustrating, I moved the Sniper Boy from the middle towards the ladder and got him perfectly within charge distance of that Custodian.
Yep.
I wasn't even thinking that was a thing to begin
Hindsight,
with.
man.
2020.
Yep.
But yeah.
After that second turning point, though, I pretty much bagged that game.
Yeah, for sure. I was running out of operatives, especially my big hitter. My Breacher Boy went down pretty quickly. My Sniper Boy and my Rocket Boy all died turn 2 or
within 1 or 2 shots.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
Biggest thing for me at the end of that game was being able to finally get points on Marksman, holding my leader back for 2 turning points.
That was incredible, because the other one I took was Deadly Marks, or Headhunter.
Yeah.
Couldn't see him throughout the entire game.
And I had figured when you revealed Rout that was one of them, which kind of made me nervous about stacking Deadly Marksman on him too, because if I lost him, I lost not just my Tac-Op, but also scored you points.
Exactly.
But I wasn't really worried about it at the end there when he was...
when there was nobody left
There was nobody left to shoot him, yeah.
It looks like Ethan behind the camera has a question. What's up?
Nate, did you, when he had his leader in the back the whole time, did you figure that he might have had Deadly Marksman?
You know what? I wish I could say I did, but no, it wasn't even a thought. I wasn't even thinking about the Tac-Ops. It was very in the moment trying to figure out model to model. I had no chance to really sit and plan out because I lost so many models before they could activate. So I was constantly kind of on the fly trying to figure out who needed to go where, essentially.
Too focused on your team, not
Yeah,
paying
the bigger
attention to my
picture.
team. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I'm not a big fan of security in general, but I feel like that would have been the better play here, because Seek and Destroy is really hard, especially against Custodians.
Against Custodians, I don't think
That was
I
not
don't
a
think
good
it was
choice
a
on
good
my
choice,
part either.
But it is what it is.
Exactly.
I think at the end of that game there, the third turning point, I used at the end of the second turning point and third turning point, I used Brotherhood of the Demigods.
That worked out
Which
really well as well.
got changed right at the beginning of when this version of Kill Team kind of released, because it was really good, and it proved to be really good again. You know, it's a little bit
allows
more
you to instantly
specific,
kill two more
a little bit more niche.
operatives.
It
worked
also
really
allowed
well.
me to get Deadly Marksman right away. Get that flipped at the end of that turning point.
Which,
that way I
yeah,
could
use it
achieve
right
the points in the
immediately.
next turning point. So it was pretty good.
really
I
well.
liked it. Yeah. Other than that, though, do you have any other points to go over about that game?
Not really. Brett, it looks like he has a question as well. What's up?
Yeah, so there was one thing that I had noticed during the game, and Nate, when you were using your knob, the commander, I know he's got a pretty strong melee profile with that power claw. 4s on 3s, 5, 7, brutal, I think.
It is brutal.
And I know, to Blaine's credit, you did a really good job with keeping your Storm Shield guys in the middle of the map.
That was a
Nobody
big
likes
thing.
to fight
No, I was
that
actually
area.
scared too.
Yeah.
Even with brutal, it's still
Yeah,
not
even
really
with brutal
worthwhile.
and lethal 5-up.
Right.
Lethal 5-up, you get
Right.
one crit and you can double parry any 2 hits. So brutal isn't as effective as normal.
Exactly. And the only thing that I wish we would have seen was, I believe there was a point, actually the point you're talking about with the Brotherhood of the Demigod, with the comms boy in engagement range with that
Yep.
custody. There was a moment there where I believe the knob could have actually charged into that same custody.
So yes, before, yes. So at the end of that turning point,
I think I know
near
which
near
part
the
you're
end of the
talking
turning
about.
point, your knob was in the same spot, and you pushed him up to shoot at this custody up here.
Exactly.
Instead of charging and getting the combat support, I kind of thought, didn't think about it at the time, but I feel like that probably would have been a better decision.
Probably. My biggest thought was I really didn't want to lose the Daka boy to the one up there, because especially since he was at 1 health. He was at that 1 health. The Daka boy couldn't do nothing. And I knew if there was a shooting attack or a melee, the Daka boy would have died immediately. So
I would have done what Nate did.
Yeah, so
I was
it was
hoping
kind of
for-
a toss up between confirming the kill on the custody or doing a buttload of damage on another custody.
exactly.
But then you're kind of in a spot where your knob either dies to combat, or you've got 2 really weak custodies and not the
No operatives
operatives
to
to
fight
fight them.
And
So-
I went for the confirmed kill, which it did work. It was a gamble because again, orc shooting is really, really bad. But it was a point of I really need to sit and think about that, because shooting there, it was a gamble, because again, the story could have easily saved that. I was really lucky that he didn't. However, if I pushed over there, I probably could have done a whole lot of damage. But was that a shield or was that?
That was a shield custody. So
Exactly,
fighting a
so-
shield custody, I mean, it's intimidating.
It's rough.
And one thing that I actually like to do, especially with wider teams, teams with more models, against elite teams, is that you've got bodies to throw, and even if it takes 2 or 3 models to take down, an enemy operative, that's 1/5 or 1/4 in this case of my team.
Exactly.
And so I feel like that's, in most cases, that's worth it. And I feel like you were maybe a little bit too intimidated to do that.
Yeah.
Also,
Especially against the shields.
Focusing your melee units right away. I killed the Reacher boy
very quickly.
very quickly, and the Slasher boy was too far on a range to be able to work efficiently.
I was honestly expecting your leader to charge my slash boy, or to get close to him to some capacity.
And I was going to do that, but then Deadly Marksman, I mean, that took
Exactly.
precedence. I wanted to get those points rather than
it worked out really well.
getting
You
closer
came out
to
with how
to
many
another
VPs in total? It was almost all of
17.
them. Yeah.
So
almost a
17
perfect game.
out of 18 possible. 20 if we count the painted models.
Exactly. In the end, it wouldn't have mattered. He would have won completely either way. But that is another 2 points that he confirmed either way.
I did want to touch the first turning point. Actually, the first 2 turning points. I didn't claim this objective.
Okay.
I didn't remove the data spirit or the disconnect firewall.
Yep.
And I honestly thought that you were going to use your knob to take that point from me.
I thought about that a few times, actually.
Like, deny me that VP. And so I was a little bit worried with not doing that right away. But in that third turning point, that fourth turning point, it took me to be able to finally get back to it. Which I'm really surprised that it stayed on the board that whole time.
Exactly. Again, it really came down to a level of panic. Just kind of like, I'm losing operatives.
Not
do
being
I
able
push
to
for
push
VPs
through
or
the line of
do
Custodes.
or do I try to at least run and get maybe one VP? One VP wouldn't have helped me. So again, I tried to go after Custodes, which opinions varied. I got one of them. It worked out all right.
One. One other thing I did want to touch on too is, mainly the majority of your operatives in the first turning point were all in conceal orders.
Yep.
Which kind of negated me from using Peerless Warriors, which is the double shooter, double fight, strategic ploy. And so I think that kind of saved me CP in the long run. Okay. Because the first two turning points, I didn't need to use it because there were operatives that I couldn't see or couldn't draw lines of sight to right away. And so it was like I could use it for Aegis the Emperor to reduce the incoming damage, or just use it for tactical ploys.
I could have tried Drained. Again, I was trying some new things out, and one of the big ones was just spending the first turning point to move up, position myself, and try to get like
a standing.
Exactly, get some great shots off because border control is really, really important, and I think I did a decent job at it. But again, losing operatives pretty quickly. Again, it fell apart mid turning point 2, but it was trying to get some level of board control, and I think if I was a little bit more aggressive, it might have worked out. Especially if I had the Grot up on the
I
shipping
definitely
container.
feel like you could have been more aggressive and a little bit less defensive with the amount of models versus mine and the amount of like pretty good shooters on your team. That
Followed by the cards I was playing as well.
Followed by the cards, you need that aggression, not so much defense that security kind of gives you. So I feel like playing a little bit more aggressively would have done a good job at winning you that game, or at least getting
Next
closer.
time I'll have to play more like orcs, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I feel like we're gonna end it here. This has been the post battle report discussion. We will be doing one of these on every video here, and I feel like if you could just hit us up with a subscribe or a like, share, comment, anything like that would help. So we're a new channel who's trying to grow. So
yeah,
thanks for watching, guys.
Bye.